Hi, my name is Jamshid and I'll be showing you clips from 3 different video games to represent how these games can develop cognitive abilities such as multitasking, visual spatial awareness, and hand-eye coordination. Let's get started.
The first game we will look at is Tetris Attack. This game involves a player removing blocks from their screen by moving them to be 3 or more in a row. A combo is 4 or more in a row, and a chain is when blocks fall into a row. The game mode we will look at is 2 players going head-to-head trying to defeat each other by sending so-called garbage blocks to the other player by performing combos and chains. If a block reaches the top of the screen on player A's screen before player B, then player A loses. This game is all about visual spatial awareness and quick decision making. The game is very fast-paced and requires the utmost attention from the player. Here's the start of a game. This specific game, being the boss battle, is a good representation of how fast-paced the game is. I'll point out an example of a combo and a chain during this game. There's a combo, and there's a chain. Now let's move forward to a part of the game that is a great representation of spatial awareness and quick decision making that the game asks for. Here you will see the player make quick decisions based on their awareness of the blocks that have been made available to them. The player goes on to win because of their quick decision making and great visual spatial awareness. Now we will move on to a slower game, but yet a game that requires more thought and just as much attention as the last. Age of Empires 2 is a real-time strategy where a player starts off with a small amount of resources and tries to create a civilization out of it. There are military aspects to the game, and the way to get a better military is to research things like armor and better training for soldiers. This research costs a lot of resources. I'll be showing short clips from the game to show resource management and multitasking. I will skip the beginning of the game because it is quite slow and there isn't much going on. Here's a clip where the player has run out of natural food sources like hunting and foraging and is now required to start farming. The player runs into a problem where villagers, who are the constructors and resource gatherers, are standing around with nothing to do. Idle villagers are wasted resources, so the player is assigning tasks to each villager in order to use all of their resources. Resource management is incredibly important early in the game. If the player runs out of resources early, he or she runs the risk of being invaded and taken out of the game early. This next clip shows the player running out of food, one of the 4 resources, late in the game even when there is an abundance of resources available. Being in the final age of the civilization, research is critical, and the player must make sure they are selective in the research that they choose to buy in order to preserve resources for the more relevant topics of research. For our final game, we'll move on to a game type that most people are familiar with, the first-person shooter. This game is called Rainbow Six Siege, and we will see the player go through a game mode called Terrorist Hunt. The game mode requires the player to be aware of their surroundings and have good reflexes to be ready for the enemy. This game is rated M, and even though this video is for child brain development, I don't condone the playing of this game by children. However, I'm aware of the reality that most children today can get a hold of any game on the market without a problem. Here's a representation of the player having spatial awareness and making sure that they don't run out of ammunition. While the player was refilling ammo, they heard an enemy nearby and reacted quickly to the sound. Then the player got in a position where they knew that the enemy would be unable to shoot them, and they used the environment, or the kitchen island in this case, to protect themselves. Here's a representation of the player using the environment as a part of their strategy. The player does not succeed immediately, but the distance between the enemy and the player provided the player with an advantage. This advantage was because of the difference in equipment and the player's superior hand-eye coordination, which allowed the player to defeat this enemy. Decision making, resource management, and hand-eye coordination are all skills that can be used in the real world, and if video games will help children develop these skills, then why not let them play?